She was kicked out of the bridal shop for not looking like she belonged, until a celebrity bride walked in. The bridal shop bell chimed softly as she stepped in, careful not to let the door slam behind her. Sunlight poured through the large front window, casting sharp shadows across glossy floors and rows of glimmering gowns. For a moment, it felt like walking into a dream, until the silence hit her. 3 employees behind the front counter all turned their heads. None of them smiled. One of them, a pale young woman with a tight bun and clipboard, looked her up and down like someone inspecting a delivery that had arrived to the wrong address. Another rolled her eyes and whispered something into her earpiece, then chuckled under her breath. And the third one, as if to top it all off, took a half-filled glass of Coca-Cola and accidentally spilled it from the ledge of her desk. The brown liquid splashed in a crooked arc, landing right on the hem of the white dress the woman wore, a dress she had pulled from the back of her closet for this special day. She didn't say a word. She didn't gasp or complain. She simply looked down at the stain as it spread like a bruise across the delicate fabric. Then she bent down, slowly, her knees popping just a little, and began blotting it with the crumpled tissue from her purse. The manager finally spoke up. "Ma'am, we don't think we have anything in your size." The way she said, "your size," made it sound like a slur. Her voice dripped with fake politeness, every word slicing. "These gowns are very fitted. Our designers cater to a certain body type. Maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere else." That was it. No greeting, no question about appointments, no offer of assistance. Just an invisible sign slammed down at the entrance. "You don't belong here." Before she turned to leave, she glanced one last time at a simple satin gown hanging on a mannequin, a dress with no frills, just grace. It reminded her of a song she used to sing to herself when she was little, dreaming of days like this. But that dream now stood locked behind velvet ropes and sneers. If this is your first time on our channel Cracks of Light, welcome. Here we share stories that are true to the bone, deep in emotion, and full of the kind of redemption life rarely gives away easy. If this story touches you, if at any point you find yourself rooting for someone who's been knocked down too many times, hit subscribe, drop a comment, or simply leave a heart. It means more than you know. It helps us keep telling these stories, because sometimes stories are the only way to make the world pay attention. Now let me tell you about the woman in the stained white dress. Her name was Janice Holloway, 51 years old, a widow, a mother of 2 girls she raised mostly alone after her husband, Marcus, died on a construction site when a safety cable snapped. She had once been an administrative assistant at a public hospital, clocking in at 6:45 a.m., lunch break at exactly 11:30, and never leaving her post until the nurses signed out. For 18 years, she worked without missing a single day. Then came the budget cuts. Then came the layoffs. Then came the day she stood in a beige hallway holding a cardboard box filled with framed photos and 3 pens that had her name on them. She didn't cry much, not then. She was too busy trying to sell her wedding ring to keep the lights on. Too busy figuring out how to make hamburger help her last 3 meals. Too busy pretending everything was fine so her youngest wouldn't stop playing piano. It had taken her a long time to believe she deserved to feel beautiful again, that she deserved to stand in front of a mirror and see something radiant looking back. Her youngest daughter, Amina, had begged her, "Mama, you should find someone again. You've got all this love in your eyes and nowhere to put it." And so, when Glenn, a soft-spoken man from her church with shoulders like a tree and eyes that didn't flinch when she told him her story, proposed to her in the parking lot after Bible study, she said yes. And today, after 2 months of careful budgeting, she decided to take her first steps into a bridal boutique. But the world, or at least this corner of it, had other plans. She left the shop in silence. No one offered her a towel. No one looked up. Her stained dress swished gently as she walked down the sidewalk, holding back tears. The sun was still shining. People still laughed on cafe patios. Somewhere a dog barked happily, and none of it made sense. It felt like the world had split in two, and she was standing on the wrong side of the glass. What no one knew, not even Janice herself, was that she hadn't been alone. Across the street, Behind the tinted windows of a sleek black SUV, someone had been watching. She wore sunglasses, a wide-brimmed hat, and the kind of effortless confidence that came from surviving things nobody else could see. Her phone was in her lap, screen dim. Her hand clenched slowly around the armrest. And as Janice walked out of the shop, that woman leaned forward and murmured something to her driver. "Pull over." Now, inside the boutique, the laughter had returned. The three employees were gossiping again, showing each other Instagram reels, joking about the surprise fashion show that just walked out. None of them noticed when the front door opened again, this time with a sharp, quiet whoosh. They didn't look up until one of them caught sight of the shoes, nude pumps that cost more than their monthly paycheck. When they finally raised their eyes, it took a second before the recognition hit. And then it did, like a freight train. The woman standing in the doorway was none other than Layla Monroe, Emmy-winning actress, magazine cover regular, the face of a billion-dollar franchise. And she wasn't smiling. She walked straight past the counter, straight past the rows of silk and sequins, and stopped in front of the mannequin with the satin gown. "I'll take this one," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, but it landed like a gavel. "But first, I want to speak with whoever decided to insult the woman who came in here before me." The boutique fell into silence. Someone dropped a hanger. The manager stammered something about policies, misunderstandings, customer fit. But Layla lifted a hand, not to silence her, but to point to the door. "You have 30 seconds, she said. "This store doesn't deserve her. And starting today, it no longer deserves me either." What they didn't know, what the tabloids didn't know, what the cameras never caught, was that Janice Holloway had once been Layla Monroe's next-door neighbor in East Chicago. That she used to babysit Layla when her mother worked night shifts. That she was the first person who ever told Layla she was beautiful. Even when the neighborhood boys said otherwise. Even when Layla had crooked teeth and a stutter. And what Janice didn't know, yet, was that her story was about to change. Because someone had finally seen her. Really seen her. Not as a stereotype. Not as a problem. But as someone who once gave light when no one else did. And who now deserved to have that light returned. And for the first time in years, a door had opened. Not the kind with velvet ropes or clearance signs, but a real door to a future she hadn't even dared imagine. Janice didn't sleep that night. Not because of sadness, although it clung to her like a second skin, but because her mind wouldn't stop spinning. The stain on her dress was still there, a brown reminder of what the world thought of her, and yet something else lingered stronger, an image she couldn't quite make sense of. That woman, the one she glimpsed as the door closed behind her. A flash of caramel skin, high cheekbones, and those eyes. It was like seeing a ghost of someone she once loved like family, but had long buried in memory. The face stirred something, but Janice didn't trust her memory enough to believe it. The next morning, she folded the ruined dress carefully, as if still hoping to rescue it one day. She put it in a paper bag and slid it under the bed. There were other things to do, bills to check, an application for a cleaning job at the local library to submit, another interview downtown for part-time work handing out samples in a grocery store aisle. Life moved, whether or not you wanted to follow. But the humiliation didn't end at the boutique. It followed her like a shadow, silent and sharp. When she walked into the HR office to follow up on a janitorial application, the receptionist didn't even glance up from her phone. When she spoke, the words came flat, uninterested. "We're not hiring at the moment. Try back next quarter." But the sign outside had said help wanted. Janice turned to look again, just to be sure. She pointed. "It says, it's old." The receptionist interrupted without lifting her gaze. Janice nodded, quietly turned, and left. Outside, it was raining, not hard, but enough to soak through her sleeves in minutes. She didn't run. She had stopped running a long time ago. She tried at the daycare around the corner. The woman behind the desk was kind, at first, until Janice handed her resume and the woman's eyes flickered over it. "Do you have experience with younger children recently?" Janice explained that she'd raised 2 daughters on her own, volunteered at the church nursery for years. But the woman's smile faded. "We're actually looking for someone a little more current." Janice thanked her, folded the paper, and walked out. At the grocery store, she was told she looked a little tired for a front-facing role. At the medical office, They said the job had just been filled. One rejection turned into five. 5 into 10. Soon she stopped counting. The worst wasn't the words. It was the looks. The slight recoil when people met her eyes. The way they scanned her body as if doing the math of her worth. The curve of her hips. The width of her shoulders. The color of her skin. Everything became a measure. Every glance a verdict. She kept walking anyway. One afternoon, as she passed through a strip mall parking lot with her shoes soaked from a broken storm drain, a group of teenagers stood near a parked car, laughing. One of them pointed his phone in her direction and whispered something. The others burst into laughter. She heard the word walrus. Then bride. Then she saw the screen of his phone and realized they had filmed her at the boutique. The stained dress. Her back turned. Her hunched shoulders. It was edited, cropped, captioned. The video had been uploaded. Her pain, now public. Janice didn't stop. She didn't speak. She just kept walking until her knees gave way behind a dumpster behind the pharmacy. She sat in the cold, hugging her own arms, and closed her eyes. But even there, on concrete soaked with motor oil and the smell of old fries, she picked up a crushed plastic water bottle someone had dropped and set it upright next to the trash can. Old habits. She still did good things in small ways. No one saw. That night, she passed by a woman struggling to load groceries into a rusted hatchback. The woman's cart had stuck between two sidewalk cracks. Janice walked up without a word, pushed from behind until it rolled free. The woman grunted, didn't say thank you. Janice didn't mind. She nodded, adjusted her scarf, and kept walking. She found a wallet near the bus stop, wrapped in damp leaves. She opened it, saw a driver's license, credit cards, a folded photo of a baby girl. The address was only 2 blocks away. She walked there, knocked on the door. A man answered. He looked at her, looked at the wallet, then snatched it from her hand without a word. Slammed the door. Again, Janice didn't say anything. She didn't need thanks. It wasn't why she did things. But what she didn't know was that a small security camera above that door had captured the entire moment. Not just the return, but her expression, her silence, her choice to walk away with grace. That same week, she found herself eating dinner at a community shelter. A half-stale bun, a cup of soup, a small apple. She gave the apple to the boy sitting next to her, who had no fruit on his tray. The boy's mother looked away, ashamed. Janice smiled gently and said, "He needs it more than I do." And she went back to her broth. Behind the serving station, a young volunteer in a green apron watched all of this quietly. Later that night, she wrote a post about it. Not a video, not a spectacle, just a story. "Tonight, I saw kindness that humbled me. A woman with nothing gave the last thing she had to a hungry child. I don't know her name, but I'll never forget her face." The post got 32 likes, then 300, then 4,000. But Janice didn't know. She didn't even have a phone that worked consistently. The charger cable was frayed, and the battery barely held power. She didn't scroll. She survived. Her life continued in slow motion. She applied for a part-time housekeeping role at a mid-range hotel downtown. The manager there asked if she could stand on her feet 8 hours. "Yes," she said. "I've done more with less." The woman raised an eyebrow, took her resume, and said they'd call if anything opened up. Janice nodded. She knew the line. Later that week, as she stood outside the laundromat waiting for her clothes to finish drying, a man passed by and dropped a dollar bill. It fluttered in the wind. Janice bent, picked it up, caught up to him. "Sir, you dropped this." He looked at her with suspicion. "You sure it's not yours?" She smiled. "I'm sure." He took it with a grunt, walked off. She didn't even sigh. But someone else saw. A teenage girl across the street with blue braids and a phone in her hand. She didn't say anything, just watched. And later, when she uploaded her vlog about people who still do right when no one's watching, she included that moment, fuzzy, zoomed from far away, but real. Her caption read, "Be like her." And still, Janice knew none of this. She went home to a flickering lamp, a chipped mug of tea, and a space heater that rattled when it ran. She had hope, somewhere deep down, but it was thin now like the hem of an old sweater. Still, she carried herself with grace. She greeted her neighbors with respect, even when they ignored her. She held the elevator, even when no one thanked her. She gave. She waited. She endured that. That's what made her different. She wasn't trying to be seen. She wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. She simply lived by her own code, a silent one written in the bones of people who have weathered too much. Be good, even when no one claps, even when no one claps back. But something was changing. Subtle things. A second glance here. A door held there. A stranger nodding at her, as if they knew something she didn't. She chalked it up to coincidence. It was easier than hoping. Hope could be dangerous when it let you down. Before point one morning, she opened her mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note that simply said, "You're not invisible. We see you." No signature. World knew her name. Janice stared. Her hands trembled. The phone nearly slipped. Behind her, the candle flickered. The man handed her the folder. Inside was a contract, a full-time job, with health benefits, with housing support, with dignity. Janice sat down on the edge of the folding chair. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just closed her eyes and breathed. But outside, on a quiet street where no one had looked twice at her before, something shifted. A neighbor walked past, paused, and nodded. A child waved. A car slowed. People had started seeing that IT wasn't fame. It wasn't a miracle. It was recognition. And that, for Janice Holloway, was enough. She hadn't changed. But the world around her finally had. The next time Janice stepped into the bridal shop, she wasn't alone. The front window had been changed. The displays had shifted. Gone were the towering mannequins and impossible silhouettes. Gone were the icy stares behind the front desk. In their place stood a young clerk with nervous hands and a clipboard that trembled when she spotted the woman walking through the door with someone by her side. Layla Monroe entered a half-step behind Janice, dressed in a simple cream coat and flats. No glam team, no camera crew, just presence. A presence that made the room hold its breath. The same boutique that once humiliated Janice now seemed too quiet, too bright, like it knew the air had changed. They didn't walk to the front counter. They walked straight toward the back, where the dress still hung on a rack, untouched, as if waiting. The clerk tried to speak, but Layla lifted her hand slightly, the same way she had when commanding a set. "We won't be needing help," she said without raising her voice. "We're here for her fitting." A different manager appeared from behind a curtain, someone Janice had never seen before. He was older, grayer, but something about his eyes suggested this wasn't his first time cleaning up someone else's mess. He approached slowly, hands open. "Ms. Holloway," he said, "I want to apologize on behalf of everyone here. What happened was unacceptable. The individuals responsible are no longer employed. We've also made a donation in your name to a women's shelter downtown. We were wrong." Janice didn't nod. She didn't smile. She simply looked at the man and said, "I know." Then she turned toward the mirror. It was the first time in years she let herself look fully. Not just a glance while brushing her hair. Not just a downward tilt to check for stains. But a real, steady, honest look. She saw the folds of her arms, the curve of her back, the stretch marks that lined her waist like whispers of survival. And then she looked at the dress. Simple satin. No sparkle. No apology. She reached out and touched it. The clerk offered to help zip it, but Janice waved her off. "I've got it." When she stepped out from behind the curtain, the room fell silent. Layla was already standing, eyes glassy. "You look like the woman I always saw when I was a little girl," she whispered. "Strong. Untouchable." Janice chuckled softly, shook her head. "I look like someone who finally stopped hiding." They didn't buy the dress. The boutique offered it as a gift, along with a personal note from the designer, who had seen the viral video and cried. Janice accepted it not because of the price, but because it symbolized something no money could buy. Not beauty, but visibility. Not fabric, but honor. News outlets started picking up the story. Not tabloids, not gossip blogs, but real reporters who saw more than a celebrity cameo. They saw a narrative that stretched further, deeper. They called Janice the woman who reminded the world that dignity doesn't wear size. That kindness isn't weakness. That grace can look like picking up a phone and returning a wallet when the world keeps turning its back. One reporter asked Janice if she wanted to get even with those who mocked her. She just smiled. "I didn't come here to get even," she said. "I came to get free." The women who had poured Coca-Cola on her dress tried to backtrack. One claimed it was a mistake. Another said she hadn't known Janice was a friend of Layla Monroe. But none of it mattered anymore. The store issued a public statement. Then another. Then quietly removed all past management from their website. Janice never commented on it. She didn't need to. Meanwhile, the organization that had accidentally received her misdirected letter offered her a full-time role. Not just any role, director of outreach for a new housing initiative. Her job would be to mentor women like her. Women who had fallen through cracks no one was supposed to fall through. Women with degrees and discipline and dreams, who just needed one person to say, "I see you." On her first day, she wore a blue blazer she'd found at a thrift store. She carried a notebook with frayed edges and a pen that clicked too loud. And when she introduced herself to the staff, she didn't lead with titles. She said, "Hi, I'm Janice. I've been overlooked, dismissed, and called names. I've slept in a garage and eaten off paper trays. But I'm here. And if you are too, then we're already doing something right." After the meeting, a young intern approached her. She had tears in her eyes. "My mom was like you. She passed 2 years ago. I wish she had someone like you then." Janice placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "She has you now. That counts." She started getting letters. Not from reporters or producers, but from strangers. A woman in Kansas who said she'd been afraid to wear a swimsuit in public until she saw Janice on the news. A teacher in Georgia who played Janice's speech for her students. A teenager in Brooklyn who said, "I'm plus size too, and seeing you made me feel like maybe I won't be invisible forever." Janice didn't reply to them all, but she read every word. She kept the letters in a shoebox under her bed. On nights when the ache returned, when memories whispered cruel things, she'd read 1 or 2 until the shaking stopped. She never tried to go viral. She didn't ask for followers. But when Layla posted a photo of Janice with the caption, "My hero in heels," the world paid attention. Not because Janice wanted it, but because truth has a way of shining through when it's worn by someone who refuses to bend. One evening, Janice stood at the back of a hall where Layla was receiving a humanitarian award. Cameras flashed. Applause rose like a tide. But when Layla took the mic, she said only one thing before anything else. "Before I talk about myself, I want to tell you about the woman who taught me how to stand up straight even when the world tried to bend me." She pointed to the back. "Janice, stand up." The room turned. Hundreds of eyes. Dozens of cameras. But Janice didn't flinch. She stood slowly, shoulders back, chin up. The applause swelled again, and this time it wasn't for a celebrity. It was for her. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She just nodded. The next day, she returned to work like normal. She brewed coffee in the break room, fixed the paper jam in the copier, and stayed late to help one of the new residents fill out a form. When someone asked why she didn't hire an assistant, she laughed. "I've been alone enough to know how much it means when someone actually stays." The same boutique that turned her away now offered her a position as a guest advisor for their new inclusive campaign. She declined politely, not out of bitterness, but because she had work that mattered more. Justice didn't come from lawsuits or headlines. It came from knowing she never lowered herself to hate and still came out standing. It came from watching the same child who once asked her if they'd ever afford eggs, now calling her to say, "Mama, you made it. You really did." It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a real one. And sometimes that's better than any fairy tale. Janice's new apartment wasn't big. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen with chipped tiles, and a balcony that overlooked a grocery store parking lot. But to her, it felt like a palace. The first night she moved in, she didn't unpack. She didn't rush to organize or clean. She just sat on the floor, still in her coat, and listened to the silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from loneliness, but the kind that feels earned. Peaceful. Sacred. The silence of a place where no one could kick her out. No landlord waiting with folded arms. No notices slid under the door. Just warmth and a key she held in her own hand. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise and brewed coffee on the stovetop, the way Marcus used to. She placed 2 cups on the table. One for her, one for memory. It was a quiet ritual, but one that anchored her. Then she'd put on her badge, grab her notebook, and head to the center. Her commute was short. The walk took 10 minutes, 15 if she stopped to chat with the bus driver or the crossing guard who now greeted her by name. The first time someone called out, "Hey, Miss Janice," from across the street, she turned around slowly, unsure if it was meant for her. It was. And the second time it happened, she smiled before she even heard the voice. The women at the shelter called her Mama J, not because she asked them to, but because the way she listened reminded them of a mother they'd wished for. She never preached, never pretended to have all the answers. But when they spoke, she listened with her whole face, with her eyes, with silence. And sometimes that was more healing than any speech. One Thursday afternoon, a girl named Renee came into her office. She couldn't have been more than 22. Shaky hands, a hospital bracelet still wrapped around her wrist. Janice asked her what she needed. Renee said, "I don't know. I just couldn't sleep anymore on that bench." Janice nodded. "You don't have to. Not tonight." She gave her a clean blanket, a room key, and a bowl of soup. Renee cried into the spoon. Janice didn't interrupt. She waited, then gently handed her a napkin and said, "Let the crying be the loudest thing you have to do here." As weeks passed, more women came. Some broken, some angry, some too tired to feel anything. But Janice met each of them with the same steady patience. She remembered their names, their children's names, their birthdays. She hung their artwork on the hallway walls. She let them pick music for the kitchen. She made the place feel like home, even if it wasn't forever. One morning, as she swept the front steps, a woman from the boutique arrived. Not one of the cruel ones, but a new hire. Young, nervous. She handed Janice a package. Inside was a letter. "We've changed some things," it read. "And that started with you. Thank you for making us better." Janice folded the letter and placed it on her desk under a paperweight shaped like a heart. She didn't frame it. She didn't brag about it. She just carried on. The best part of her week was Sunday mornings. Not because of church, though she still went when she could, but because it was the one day her older daughter, Chandra, came over with her kids. They brought muffins, sticky fingers, laughter. Her grandbaby would run through the tiny apartment like it was a castle. Janice would sit on the balcony with a glass of iced tea and just watch them, her heart full in the way words could never capture. Sometimes, neighbors from her old block would come by too, quietly, with embarrassment in their eyes. One of them, Miss Darlene, once sneered at Janice for acting like she was somebody when she brought leftovers to share. Now, she came holding a bag of lemons and a whisper. "I saw what they said about you. I was wrong." Janice just nodded, took the lemons, and invited her to sit. The same teenage girl who filmed her returning the wallet now stopped by on weekends to help clean at the center. She didn't say much at first, but one day, as they folded donated coats together, she asked, "How did you forgive them?" Janice looked up, hands still. "Because I needed peace more than I needed revenge." The girl nodded slowly, her face softening. She never stopped being herself. She still clipped coupons, still fixed her own light bulbs, still prayed in the morning and before bed. But now, when she walked into a room, people stood a little straighter. They moved aside so she could pass. Not out of fear, but respect. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. A journalist reached out once to write a full feature on her. Janice declined. "Tell the stories of the women still climbing," she said. "I already made it." But her story traveled anyway. Word of mouth. Whispers. Testimonies from people who had seen her, heard her, been lifted by her. One man wrote, "I used to think strength was about yelling louder. But then I met Janice." Another said, "She never raised her voice. But she made me want to be better." At the center, they put up a bulletin board. At first it was meant for announcements, but it became something else. People started pinning photos of small moments. Janice tying a girl's shoe. Janice holding an umbrella over a mother and her baby. Janice laughing in the kitchen while stirring a pot of beans. The board filled fast. No plaques, no awards, just proof that she had been there and left something behind. In the third month of her job, she stood in front of a new group of residents. She told them, "I'm not here to rescue you. I'm here to remind you you were never lost." One woman sobbed. Another stood up and clapped. Slowly, the rest followed. She didn't let it go to her head. That night, she went home, peeled a sweet potato, and watched the sun dip behind the rooftops. She whispered thank you to the quiet. She never called herself a leader, but people followed. Never asked to be an example, but people watched. Never demanded to be remembered, but people did. And every night, when she sat at her window with a blanket over her lap and the city breathing softly around her, she thought about all the times she almost gave up, all the doors that slammed, all the rooms she wasn't welcome in. And she smiled, not because it had been easy, but because she never let it make her cruel. And now, finally, she was home. On a mild spring morning, Janice Holloway sat on a bench outside the community center with the sun warming her back and a small spiral notebook in her lap. Children's laughter echoed from the nearby playground, and the smell of jasmine from the neighbor's garden drifted across the sidewalk. She wore the same cardigan she always had, the one with the frayed sleeve she kept meaning to mend. In one hand she held a pen, and in the other a folded letter, handwritten, edges soft from being read too many times. It was from a girl she had helped months ago, a girl who now lived in her own apartment and had just enrolled in a GED program. The letter simply said, "You gave me more than a bed. You gave me a way back to myself." Janice closed her eyes and let that sentence soak into her bones. Life wasn't grand. It wasn't covered in spotlights or magazine spreads, but it was steady. It was whole. Her fridge was rarely full, but it was never empty. Her phone buzzed not with reporters or brands, but with reminders from the shelter and voice notes from her daughter. Some nights, she still ached from old memories. Days when her hands shook as she signed her last eviction notice, when her daughters asked if they'd still be together by morning. But now, there was laughter in her home. There was music. There were fresh towels folded neatly in a basket she once borrowed and never returned. She didn't keep a mirror in her bedroom. Not because she hated her reflection, but because she no longer needed it to tell her who she was. Her worth didn't hang from a hanger or hinge on a zipper. It lived in the way she sat beside people when they were breaking and didn't flinch. In the way she reached into her bag, found a mint, and gave it to a woman who hadn't brushed her teeth in 3 days. In the way she never told anyone how hard it had been, but they knew anyway, just from the way she listened. She had become something more than a survivor. She had become a symbol. Not loud, not dramatic, but solid, gentle, real. One afternoon, a boy walked up to her on the street. He couldn't have been older than 15. Baggy jeans, a nervous grin. He looked at her like he was trying to remember something. "You're that lady, right?" he asked. "From The Thing." Janice smiled. "I've been a lot of ladies." "Which one you mean?" He fumbled with his backpack and pulled out a printed article, wrinkled and faded. It was her face, younger, under a headline that read, "The Woman Who Taught Us What Grace Really Looks Like." He said, "My mom read this to me when I got suspended. She said if I ever meet you, I should thank you for not giving up." Janice didn't say anything for a moment. Then she leaned forward, touched his arm gently, and said, "Then you go home and do something kind today. That'll be thanks enough." At the community center, they eventually painted a mural in the hallway. It wasn't grand, just soft colors, a series of small images. A woman tying a scarf around another's neck, a child being held, a hand returning a lost wallet, and at the center of it all, a silhouette with no face, just a crown made of branches and light. No one wrote her name beneath it. They didn't need to. Everyone who passed through knew exactly who it was. One rainy evening, Janice wrote a letter she never sent. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It just said, "I thought the world would never see me, but maybe I was just meant to remind it to see others." Maybe that was the whole point. She tucked into her notebook and placed it on the shelf between her Bible and an old cookbook with pages falling out. The next morning, she went to the farmer's market and bought too many sweet potatoes. She gave half to her neighbor and left 2 on the steps of a single mother across the hall. No note, no explanation, just a habit of quiet giving she'd never unlearned. She still walked to work, still wore her same shoes, still kept an extra granola bar in her purse in case she crossed paths with someone who looked like they needed it. And when people stopped her to say thank you or ask for advice or take her photo, she always said the same thing. "I'm not famous. I'm just someone who kept showing up." On the wall inside the shelter was a single framed quote. No attribution, no decoration, just a sentence that read, "Sometimes the smallest kindness is the one that saves a life." People asked who said it. Volunteers pointed her office. She did, they said, but she'll deny it. And in time, she became part of the place. Like the bricks, like the scent of warm cornbread on Friday nights, like the way women lowered their shoulders the moment they saw her coming. Not because she demanded anything, but because she carried peace with her like it was folded into her coat pocket. In a world that too often rewards the loudest, the flashiest, the most filtered, Janice Holloway became proof that the quiet ones still matter. That gentleness has power. That survival, when done with grace, becomes something stronger, something unforgettable. She never tried to teach lessons, but people learned. She never chased legacy, but she left one anyway. And if you ever walk by that shelter in the city where her story began, you might catch a glimpse of her through the glass, offering someone a cup of tea, or helping them fill out a form, or simply sitting in silence beside someone who has no words left. And when you see her, you'll know that's the woman who didn't belong, until the world finally caught up to what she'd been all along. Thank you for watching this story from Cracks of Light. If Janice's journey moved you, please leave a comment below or share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they matter. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of grace, justice, and quiet triumph. Because sometimes all it takes is a light in the dark for everything to change.